Okay, hello and welcome to another video. And it's now Inktober has finally started. It's been a week, so I finished days 1 through 7, and I thought that every single Wednesday of October, I would post another speed paint of doing the next 7 prompts. So for those that have not seen my prior prepping for Inktober videos, for this Inktober, I decided that I want to design a character every single day that has something to do with the prompt for that day. So for day 1, that included the word mustache. Gonna be honest, this was like my least favorite word at first, because I was like, mustache? I'm like, what do I create with the mustache? So originally when I was designing the character, I was like, okay, what can I think of that relates to the word mustache? So I did think about barbershops and kind of like burly fighting dudes, things like wintertime, things like that. And I was like, I kind of like the barbershop idea. So I expanded it a little bit more on it. I said, okay, what else reminds me of a barbershop? Things like scissors, what are the kind of outfits they wear at a barbershop, etc., etc. And I decided on creating this little character. Doesn't have a name or anything, but I think he looks pretty cool. And he's kind of designed to basically kind of look like a barber. At least I looked up like 1900s barbers, like older barbers, not necessarily modern style barbers. And that's where his outfit came from. I could see that a lot in the photos they used, or I guess they're not photos, so like drawings. They used a lot of just like a typical roll-up shirt with a bow tie, and sometimes they wore suspenders, or like I don't think, sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. So I added the suspenders since I felt like it just matched the overall theme. And then for his arm, I added in these kind of like tattoos of like the line, just meant to represent like the barber thing. I don't know what they're called, but like, you know, when you go to like a more traditional barber and they have one of those like little spinny things outside with like the red and blue stripes. Yeah, that's what his tattoo on his arm is supposed to represent. And then for his face, I went with just kind of like, I don't know, I feel like he'd have more angular eyes, you know, not super like round eyes or whatever. And then I kind of went with like a pretty typical hairstyle, I guess, kind of like longer in the top, slicked back on the side or something. It just felt like very barbery or something. And then I gave him scissors, but instead of just giving him like regular scissors, I decided to make them really big. So I can almost imagine like if he maybe was like a video game character, like maybe his scissors are like a weapon or something. I'm a video game developer, like programmer, as like my day job or whatever. So I think, you know, maybe experimenting with some of these designs being possibly used in like a video game is pretty fun and interesting. So I did think that I'm giving him some really big scissors. I mean, number one, I think like it helps his silhouette. I think it makes his silhouette looks more interesting. But also I think that it just is an idea, and I could see maybe creating a game off of that theme or something. Obviously I'd have to expand upon it, but I think it makes an interesting premise. But yeah, for a design, this was the first one I kind of really went with. It was like, okay, I think it was a good start. I didn't give him a mustache. I thought about giving him a mustache. Clearly I didn't. Not for like, I don't know, on the one hand, I don't really know how to draw mustaches like well. They always like look weird. So I think that's kind of like one of the reasons why I didn't bother giving a mustache, but also it just felt easy. Like, I don't know, it felt weird. Like, I don't know, it just felt very obvious. You know, I kind of wanted to try to create designs that weren't like super obvious of the words necessarily, or at least not super obvious like every single day. You know, I kind of wanted to think outside the box a little bit. So I was like, well, okay, I just won't put a mustache on him. And I like the design he has right now without the mustache. So I was like, okay, I'll just leave it out. Before the actual inking, I'm using a glass pen that I bought off of Temu because I was buying a textbook I needed that I swear to God I could like only really get at a reasonable price off Temu. And then in like they recommended or whatever, they said like a glass dip pen. And I remember that I was watching, I think with Jazz's video where he was trying a bunch of Temu art supplies, and one of them was like the glass dip pen, and he said that it was like surprisingly good for only being $1. I was like, and the Temu was offering me was only $1. I was like, you know what, that sounds kind of like an interesting art supply, so I bought it. Almost thought I wasn't gonna be able to use it because I could not find it for when I actually wanted to sit down and feel myself inking this. But yeah, I did end up finding it obviously and using it. I used some random ink that I just happened to have. I don't know where this ink came from. I swear to God, I did not buy it. Don't know where it came from, but yeah, it works fine. It's called like Parker ink or something. Like, I'm 99% sure you would not find it in like an art store because I don't think it's targeted towards like artists. I think it's just like, I think it's probably targeted more towards like calligraphy users or whatever, like people that like to do lettering. So I don't know how I ended up with it, but that was ink that I used here, and it was an interesting experience. At first it was definitely like, you know, a little rough. I always do this thing when I line art traditionally where I do like so many scratchy lines at the start, and I don't know why I always do this, because like that's not what I do for like the rest. I only like do it the worst at like the very beginning, and I do not understand why I'm like that. So it's always really annoying. But when I did start using it, it was definitely a very interesting experience, obviously, because glass dip pen, you know, it's obviously just one size throughout like the entire piece. You know, have multiple sides you can play with. At least not really. I did kind of find a way to semi-replicate a thicker inking with just the same glass pen. And that's really, I noticed, I'm not sure if this is how all glass pens work, or if I bought like a really nice quality one, if it would work exactly the same. This was a repoint off of Temu, so works fine, but I have nothing to compare it to. So, you know, just a disclaimer. But I did find that when you first ink it and then start drawing on it, that's when like the most amount of ink kind of comes out compared to after you used it for a little bit, you've gone through a little bit of the ink, and then the line width just feels a little bit thinner. So at the very end, I like to add a thicker outline to my characters, as well as like and like maybe like their hands or something, like basically just anything that I feel like it kind of needs more depth or dimension, like it needs to pop out more. I'll give it a thicker liner around that. So I figured out that I could do that with the glass dip pen by just dipping it in the ink and like doing the outline from there, since it was squirting more ink with every single stroke or whatever. So that was interesting. There was definitely times where, you know, I kind of missed my ability of having the different sizes or whatever to work with, but you know, to be like, you know, again, maybe there's like different tip sizes in glass dip pens or something that I could look into. I don't know, but it was a pretty fun experience. Okay, and for day 2, the prompt was weave. So originally when I heard this, I was like, okay, weaving. I immediately thought of silk and like kind of like old fairy tales or medieval tales of like people weaving, I guess. But so I did think of spiders. I was like, okay, like silk, yeah, silk comes from spiders, I'm pretty sure. So I was like, okay, that sounds like an interesting idea. I was messing with like a lot of ideas. Again, I wanted to try to do something a little bit more unique. So I guess on this day, I probably could have just created a spider sauna and it would have made sense. But no, so instead what I created was I wanted it to be spider themed, but I was also inspired from spray paint cans, or not necessarily spray paint, but you know, like the string cheese, like the string cheese cans or whatever that you can squirt cheese out of or something. I was thinking of things like that. And then I was also thinking of, because I thought of things like that, I ended up thinking of the game Subway Surfers and the character, you know, like the way the character looks and everything. So for this character, I was like, okay, I feel like, you know, I don't know, maybe he's like a character that shoots out silk from spray cans or whatever. And I'm not quite sure what the world he lives in, or what use case this thing that he enjoys doing has, but I think you know, it's a pretty cool and interesting idea. It's like, I think I definitely like the face, and I think the idea of silk in like a spray can is like kind of interesting, and I like the way he has like spider legs in the back, which I think is probably, I'm not sure if it's part of his body or more of like a machine on his back. I'm really quite decided. But I like the overall idea and concept. I feel like it could be interesting for something. I'm just not quite sure what. But yeah, he was supposed to have a like a vest that had like a bunch of like kind of like Hobie from the Spider-Verse. You know, where he has like a vest and a bunch of like things just like attached to his vest or whatever. He was gonna have that. And then I decided to change my mind and draw a spider on his sweatshirt instead. So I'm not 100% sure how I feel about like the outfit. I feel like the outfit needs a little bit of work. Not necessarily like the pants, and you can't see his shoes here, but things like the pants and shoes, honestly, I thought was like fine, but I definitely think his top needs some work. I'm not like totally content with the final design for his top came out. But I do really like how his hair came out. I think it looks much more Genshin-y, if that makes any sense. If you guys watched my video where I drew Flynn's, I mentioned really wanted to work on my hair and really liking the way Genshin's hair came out or whatever. So I do really like the way his hair came out. I like the idea of him having multiple eyes, and spiders have like a ton of eyes, I think. So I like the idea of him having multiple eyes, and I usually like to mess with the pupils to make something interesting if I can. So I did mess with his pupils by making them kind of like cobweb themed. I think this is definitely a use case where having a thinner pencil or something would have worked a lot better, since it was, you know, the ink was like kind of thick for it was kind of thick to get the details of his eyes. I feel like his eyes look very busy, but I feel like part of that's just because the ink was so thick. So that's definitely like a use case where it would have been useful to have more options for size. But overall, I think it came out okay. Another tip that I learned while messing around with the glass dip pens were that I think one of the reasons I like them, or like, oh, you're right. So like a tip I have is the face. So for the face, you usually don't want really thick lines because everything just, it's more condensed in one area. So I was like, okay, so I did figure out that if I just planned it out strategically, I could be like, okay, I kind of like used the thicker lines for things like the outline of the character as well as like the clothes or the hair. And then when I saw that the pen was like, I want to say halfway out of ink, that's when I would go to the face, because then it's like, you know, the ink is coming out a little bit thinner, so it doesn't, you know, splotch everywhere. But also there's enough ink that it should get me to kind of like the end of his face, because the face has like a lot of details, but it's mainly like the eyes and stuff, like the mouth, nose, eyebrows. Those are all like very simple. It doesn't take like that much ink. The most amount of ink was probably spent just drawing his eyes and things, since I like thicker and bigger eyes. So I did find that pretty useful to do that, and that's what I used for all of the drawings. That's why I always do now. I prefer it to be halfway before getting to the face. So that was fun. But I also have enjoyed avoid having it be very loose. I think it's one of the things I wanted to test with the glass dip pen because because when you use like things like fine liners and stuff, I like to move my arms and like do my lines very quickly sometimes, especially in digital. And it's really hard to do that traditionally because if you go too fast, none of the ink can hit the paper in time. It just creates like a really messed up line. So that's always like kind of like really annoying to deal with. So that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to try doing things where you dip it in ink like this, since I figured I could do quicker lines without having that problem as much. I definitely had that here. I like how messy it looks overall, but I do like how I had the freedom to kind of do really quick lines like that. It wasn't always perfect. It would still like get the streaks or whatever, which is probably just a side effect of just digital in general or traditional in general. But yeah, this has been a pretty fun experiment so far. Okay, on to day 3. Honestly, I really like day 3 and how it came out. I really like the design. Originally, when I saw the prompt crown, I was going to draw my OC Prince Evan, which hasn't been featured on my channel really. I did do a poll once for you guys to choose a hairstyle for him that you liked, but that was it. That's kind of all you guys have really seen the Prince Evan. But so I initially planned on being like, well, okay, maybe this will be kind of like a break day. I can draw like a character I've already designed that's a prince. But I'm so glad I ended up not doing that and just designing a completely new prince. Obviously, since the prompt was crown, I'm sure I could have come up with something outside of a prince, but I really like medieval themes and like princes and things like that. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to design another prince. And since it was Inktober and Halloween, everything dark and spooky, I was like, okay, let's make like a dark prince. This would be kind of fun. And I really like how his design came out in the end. I think it's like, I don't know, I just really like it. I feel like I could totally use him in something, maybe like a future webcomic or something. I don't know, but I definitely really like the way his design came out. It looks pretty cool. His hand, when I drew his hand, I actually wanted it to be in a glove, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to do like those lines. I see a lot of time when artists want to draw gloves and like make it obvious that it's a glove, but they'll draw like these like lines, like kind of like where the stitch seams are in gloves, that a lot of gloves have, or at least like older gloves or something, and it makes it immediately very obvious that's a glove. So I wasn't 100% sure if I would be able to include those lines here because I thought they'd be too thick, since again you can't really get thinner or thicker lines. Like you can do thicker a little bit, you can kind of cheat it, but not like really that much. But so I am very thankful that I did the trick that I did with the face again, where I waited until a lot of the ink had kind of gone off the brush, so there wasn't much left, and then I drew the lines and it worked out pretty well. So I'm pretty happy with how that came out. I did add a fluffy thing to his shoulder. Something that I've learned a lot from studying character design videos is things like shape and stuff, so I tried to keep that in mind when designing characters to a degree. I know like when you're designing characters that are more like real life characters, it's a little bit harder to listen to shape, because I can guarantee you there's plenty of anime where like if you put their the characters like silhouette, not 100% sure I'd always get it because sometimes like they do just kind of look like an average person. You really need like the actual details to recognize them. But I think here his the things like the crown and I think his little fluffy coat or whatever kind of help give him an interesting silhouette. I do like how the crown came out. I looked up dark crown themes. I really didn't spend that much time on the crown and its design or something, but I think it's actually, I kind of like it. I found it on Pinterest. I don't think it looked exactly like this. It was similar, but I don't think the pattern I used was necessarily exactly the same. But yeah, so that was pretty cool. I like his hair. His hair came out pretty well. Again, I don't know, I've been on a roll with hair. I feel like the hair has been coming out pretty nice, which is pretty nice considering that I feel like I've been fumbling the hair lately. But so the hair's come out pretty nice. That's pretty nice. And then for the actual suit that he's wearing, it looks fine. It kind of looks like I don't know, it almost looks like a school uniform that I look at it, but it is supposed to be like a more princely uniform. And then he has like this little necklace thing. Not 100% sure exactly what it is or how it works. I just thought I needed something there because it felt very empty, so I added that little random necklace that was a bit inspired from Flint's. Like the overall shape of it and everything was kind of inspired from Flint's outfit and the necklace that he wears or something. Or I think it's like technically a necklace, but whatever. So I have him wearing that. Not quite sure if I'll ever change that in the future if I decide to use him for something. I mean, I'm sure he'll get probably a redesign if he does get used for something. All these characters, if I ever use them, will get probably a redesign when we get to the point where I do actually use them, just from the nature of, you know, you gotta tweak them to fit the story details that they end up coming in. But yeah, I think overall, like as like a base design, I was actually like really happy with this. So I'm super glad I decided to design a completely new character for this, because yeah, it came out really nice and I really like it. Okay, for this day, it was the prompt murky, which was pretty interesting. I looked at it, I was like, murky. I'm like, okay, how do I design a character based off the word murky? So when I thought of murky, the very first thing I thought of was a swamp, because a swamp feels murky, I guess. Things like kind of like messy, dirty, like kind of like a not clean water. So I was like, okay. So I looked up images of like a swamp and I was like, okay. And I remember finding a image that was of like, I feel like it's a pretty famous type of drawing to do, where you draw like a girl's head halfway into the water and her hair is like splayed out in the water or something, and it was like obviously very in a swamp theme area. And I was like, what okay, that's interesting. It started to give me some jumping off points, you know? I was like, okay, this sounds very interesting. I kind of like that vibe, you know? I kind of wanted to go for that. So for this character, I was like, okay, so we want swamp. I want him to be kind of messy and like kind of like ragged and run down since it's like a swamp. It's murky, you know, that's kind of like the vibes I was feeling. And then for his face, I wasn't going to give him a mask like I did at the end, but it was because when I was looking at poses to draw, one of them was a character with a mask. I was like, for some reason I just saw that and I was like, I wonder if I could give him a mask. I was like, okay, he's a swampy creature, maybe like a tree, like tree bark for his mask or something. And I think I like it. I think it gave an extra like interest to his face, you know? Like I feel like it gave his design some sort of extra interest to it or whatever. So I think it's pretty cool. I'm pretty glad I did that. I also decided to give him a snake. I was originally, you know, Aizawa from My Hero Academia has like those bandages, or whatever they're technically called, that wrap around his neck all the time. I was going to give him bandages wrapped around his neck as well, but I saw a design where someone had like a snake, I think, and I was like, oh, a swamp character. He looks very murky, you know, very like disheveled or whatever, and like with a little snake companion. That sounds super cool. So I was like, okay, so let's give him a snake. And then I realized that, oh my god, I could replace the bandages with the body of the snake. This is perfect. So that's exactly what I did, and I love it. I think it's adorable. It's amazing. He's got a little snake friend or whatever. Not quite sure what his story is, but I really like that. This is like another one designs I really like that I could totally see myself doing something with him in the future. I just don't know what it would be. But maybe like a game or a novel, a comic. I don't know. I think they're all like pretty interesting ideas. For his hair, I knew I wanted it to be messy. I was kind of inspired off of some hair that I found on Pinterest. Again, by the way, if you ever want to see the inspiration I used for every single character design, you can like look in the description. I include a link to the Pinterest board that I have that includes every single day of Inktober is its own section or whatever, and you can see the images I use for inspiration in there. But anyways, so for his hair, it went very messy. At the very end, I added in these kind of like tree branches sticking out of his hair. I can't remember if I saw that from an image or if I just saw branches and I was like, I don't remember. I can't remember if it was from an image or not. But yeah, it looks pretty cool. His eye is kind of supposed to be like a spiral or whatever, because there's a character design that came up when I looked up the word murky, and he had spiral eyes like this. I was like, that fits this character pretty well. So that's why I added some gunk onto his face, just because, I don't know, you're in the swamp, I feel like he'd be covered with gunk. So his robe as well is obviously very messy. It's very broken. I think logistically, I think bits of it might be technically wrong, but you know, that's fine. We only think about the logistics of if I, you know, technically drew his robe correctly. I don't think the way I drew the fabric necessarily makes sense, but I think you know, you probably won't really notice that right away. I think that's something you don't even realize if you really sat there and tried to like follow what was going on in his robe. But you know, whatever. So it looks pretty. I think I liked it the way it came out. I added some patches. I was like, how do you make something like disheveled? I was like, well, okay. I added like tears at the bottom and stuff. I added patches, and I also added some moss at the top on his shoulder where the snake's tail is. That's supposed to be moss. I'm not quite sure if it reads as moss. I've literally never drawn moss before, and I've probably seen moss like 10 times in my entire life. So didn't have a great reference for what moss looked like. I kind of just winged it, but I think because it's like, it definitely looks like it's something that's kind of added on top of the robe thing, so I think it's clear that's supposed to be something. But yeah, I really like this character. I could totally see myself doing something with him in the future. If you have any ideas, let me know, but I totally want to keep him and revisit him for the future, see what I can come up with. Okay, for day 5, the prompt was deer. And let me tell you, when I heard deer, I immediately thought of Eric from Animal Crossing. I have him in my village and he's adorable. I love him. And it's all like Christmas themed and everything. And I was like, oh my god, I should totally draw basically Eric. That's kind of what I ended up drawing. I basically kind of just drew Eric if he was like a human. So yeah, these are definitely like one of those characters where I'm like, I think it makes for like a cool character design. And like overall, like he looks pretty cool. His design was overall very simple. And you know, I don't think he's necessarily fleshed out enough that I would make like a game or a comic or something based around him. Maybe like a really like basic slice of life comedy kind of thing he could fit maybe. But that being said, if I ever made a modern day time period webcomic or whatever, I feel like he could totally be like a secret background character that only people who have like seen this video and stuff can recognize the reference. I feel like that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, for his design, I kept it pretty simple. I just gave him a little sweater because Eric in Animal Crossing is wearing like a little cute Christmas sweater or whatever. So I gave him a little sweater. It has a little tree on it or something. Then for his face, I gave him big eyes since Eric in Animal Crossing has some pretty big eyes. Then I gave him a little beanie, and at the end I added some antlers coming out of his beanie. Now technically speaking, do these antlers come out of his head? I don't know. I feel like where they're placed on the beanie, if you took the beanie off, it wouldn't make sense, anatomy-wise. And also, how would you get the beanie on in the first place? If the antlers are there, I don't know. I'm probably thinking about it a little too deeply, considering that he probably won't really be used for anything like serious or whatever. I'd have to think about that. But yeah, I think overall he came out pretty cute. I like the way the hair came out, just sticking out from his hat a little bit. Pretty cute. Overall, pretty simple design, but I like it. I think it came out pretty cute. Okay, for day 6, the prompt was Pierce, and this is probably the first design out of all of them that I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I think maybe the idea can kind of be interesting, but I think it needs some more time being fleshed out. But since the prompt was Pierce, I was trying to think of like what reminded me of Pierce. And I mean, now that I think about it, I probably could have gone a route of creating a tattoo artist. That actually sounds like it would have been really cool, so I'm kind of sad I didn't think of that until now. But the route that I ended up going down was I thought of fencing. So I wanted to create a character that revolved around fencing to some degree, somehow. I think part of the problem is I feel like this is one of those designs that I think you need to see kind of like the full character for it to kind of like hit the same and kind of be obvious to like see where like the Pierce vibes come from. But you can't see the full design, and I didn't really choose a very good pose where you could see the sword. So that's on me. I probably should have chose a better stance for this. I wanted to have him on a stance where he was leaning against his sword. But I guess on the one hand, that doesn't make quite sense because fencing swords, I think, are kind of flimsy. So I don't think you can really lean on them like at all. So yeah, I don't know. But for his mask, the fencing mask that they wear, I was like, ooh, I was inspired from Watch Dogs Legion, I think, like Watch Dogs 2. Or so, is there a third Watch Dogs? I don't know. But I think like Watch Dogs 2, there's this character named Ratchet, maybe? I can't remember that's an actual name from that, or if I'm thinking of something completely different. But basically, the character had a kind of like one of those electronic face things, masks, like always on his face. So that's what I thought of for this character. I was like, ooh, what if he has like one of those electronic masks for his face? Like, that'd be so cool. So that's what this is supposed to be. I don't know if it's clear. I did think about coloring in the mask so it'd be more clear, like the mask is black except the eyes. But I don't know. I definitely think like the glass pen is like fine, but if you want to cover a bigger area, I think you definitely have to use a brush, and I was lazy and didn't feel like doing that. So I kind of didn't. I just left it the way it is. But I wanted to try to add something else to the design, so I was like, okay, because I didn't want to create like just a fencer. So I added these kind of like pipe things coming out of his helmet. So I'm thinking maybe it has something to do with keeping his body alive or something. I honestly don't know, but I think that the little piping that I added, I kind of imagined it would go into his back, like he had something attached to his back or something. So yeah, I'm really not quite sure what like the details of this character is and everything else, but it is kind of like an interesting idea and probably something that I'll revisit in the future. Maybe, I don't know. I think like the outfit is like fine. I don't know. I can't tell if I liked the original idea I'd come up with in my sketchbook or if I prefer this idea, because the idea I had in my sketchbook, like my very initial idea, ended up not being what I went with, like basically at all, besides the fact that he's a fencer and he's wearing a mask. Yeah, I don't know. I feel very iffy on this design. You guys can let me know what you think about it. I'm not quite sure what I would do with him or anything. I don't know. This might be one of those designs that just kind of gets made once and then I probably might not draw him again. But at least for now, you know, this is the design. Maybe I'll decide to come back to it and do something with this character. All right, and finally, we are up to day 7. The prompt was starfish, and I think like I like the design kind of, like it obviously needs some tweaking, extra details here and there, but I think the overall design I like. I'm just not 100% sure if it really reads starfish at all. I was kind of at a loss from how to design a starfish, because again, you know, I'm not spending like that much time on these characters. Like if you gave me a prompt for starfish, I would spend way more time kind of prepping the character design, researching starfish, things like this. But since it's obviously for Inktober, a prompt every single day, I don't have that much time to spend on each design. I tend to do them just very quickly, and whatever I come up with in my first or second go is kind of just what it ends up being. So for this one, I did do some very basic research on starfish because I really had like no idea where to take this. I do know that starfish will lose their limbs, I think, to run away to safety, to distract a prey or whatever. So that's why here you can't see it. Okay, see, because I gave him a shirt that I kind of like, because I wanted him, so my original idea was to go more kind of like a CIA agent kind of theme, because the starfish loses a limb, but also apparently, I don't know if it's all starfish, but at least some starfish can apparently like inflict poison or something to like protect itself. And I was like, whoa, that's super cool. I was like, okay, so what if he's like a CI secret agent or something? And like, because you know, he's like in the field, he can like let go of his arm and use it for something, and like he has built-in poison in him that he can use or something like that. So I thought that was like a pretty cool idea. So originally he was going to be like, he was kind of going to look more towards the line of like a military character, but then I was like, okay, you know what, like starfish are like found in the ocean, so why don't we go more like an ocean theme? Like keep the idea but ocean theme, you know? So that's why I gave him this shirt that I found in a character that kind of had an ocean theme to him. I don't know. On the one hand, I think it kind of looks interesting. I like the way it looks. It looks kind of cool. But I think because he's a starfish, the scars that I added to his arms feels a little important. So I don't know if maybe it would have been better to just leave him topless or something. I really don't know. But this definitely is a character design that I like the idea of. I think for an initial design, it's not terrible. I definitely think it needs some tweaking, but I could totally see myself using him for like a video game. All right, that is it. That's all 7 character designs for this week. Oh, it's already October 8th and I have not designed the character for today, even though it's already like 2 in the afternoon. So I definitely got to get around to that. But yeah, let me know what you guys think of the character designs. I think overall, I like the vast majority of them. I definitely think I dropped the ball on day 6. I think, you know, I definitely think that one kind of needs the most amount of tweaking if I really want to be like super happy with it. But yeah, honestly, so far it's been working out pretty well. I've really liked how a lot of these characters came out. If you want to see the photos, I'll put them up on my Instagram. I've noticed I've gained some Instagram followers, even though I haven't really like advertised my Instagram at all. But I have a card website linked in the description below that includes links to all of the socials. Just know that I'm really only ever active on YouTube. I do have an Instagram that I'm trying to remember to post more often too. But so you can check out my Instagram to see the post. But also there's this website called Unravel, I think, where it's basically a website where you can post like your character designs and stuff like that. So I think I made an account. So I think I'm gonna upload the Inktober characters onto there, kind of like as a way for me to test out the website and stuff. So if you want to check it out, I'll make sure to add that to my card, so that way you can go on Unravel and check out my characters and stuff. You can even like divide your characters into like worlds and like give your characters like all these details or something. So like that sounds like super fun. Like the website sounds like super cool. So that's why I think I'm gonna use Inktober as a little test dummy for that. But if that sounds interesting, I mean, I could make a whole video about it at the end of October if that sounds interesting, you're curious about that website or whatever. So let me know. But yeah, normally on this channel I post character design, sketchbook sessions, and then art style studies, usually every Friday or every other Friday. For this Friday, it'll be a art style study of Tameka. So if any of that sounds interesting, please make sure to subscribe. Every single Wednesday for the rest of October, I will be having one of these speed paints for that week's prompt or whatever. So make sure to subscribe if you want to continue to see those, and then I will have a little sketchbook tour of going through all of them at the very end of Inktober. But yeah, okay, if you liked it, subscribe. No, if you liked the video, well, yes, subscribe, but also like the video. Make sure to comment which character is like your favorite, and if you have any name ideas for them, let me know, because they're all nameless right now. But yeah, I think that's it. Okay, bye bye.